Greetings, gang. Okay, Sunday afternoon, about lunchtime. Just finishing up some stuff that I've been doing. You guys know I've been hauling manure like crazy this week. It's been about 6 tons of it to put in all the gardens, but I want to kind of explain a little bit why. I've been out putting up, or moving, I guess, if you will, my trellises for next year. Crop rotation, which is very important. And so I kind of wanted to show you what I'm doing and explain why here real quick. All right, so here, and I'll kind of back out a little bit. Here is the big garden, and this is the one I had my potatoes and my corn in last year. And if you notice on the top, that is just tons and tons and tons of horse manure and horse bedding and everything of the sort. And then, of course, I'm starting to put the trellises over here because what's going to go over there is peas. There's going to be beans over here, etc. next year. All right. But here's the reason why, okay, that I'm putting it in. And I'm going to kind of slide over here so you can see something a little different perspective, if you will. If you notice, and I'll show this again, if you notice in the bedding there, or in the manure, there is a ton of bedding. All right, small wood chips and everything. Now, this compost I get from a racetrack breeder here. I think he is, or quarter horses at least. But there's a lot of wood chips in here. Now, the reason I wanted to get this done today was because it's supposed to rain this afternoon. And now all that manure is well aged. It's probably somewhere between 18 months and 2.5 years old. Okay. I mean, he knows what I'm looking for. He gives me the oldest stuff he's got, and we go from there. He's got massive piles of it. I think I picked up 5 or 6 more truckloads of it this week. But the reason I want to do it before the rain is because all that composted manure and that dust and everything that's in there will sink from the rain. And as you all know, wood floats. Okay. So just nature will make those wood chips rise to the top, which in turn will act as a excellent mulch for the garden over the winter and into the spring to keep the weeds at bay. Now, I know everybody's going to say, gee, all that wood chip and everything like that, won't it deplete my nitrogen in the soil? Yes, somewhat. Not so much as being on the top of the soil, will it? But when it gets tilled in, it will. But this, if you remember my fall video on gardening last year, this is why I've always practiced lasagna gardening. Because if you remember in, I think it was late September or whatever, I had done a video and was showing you guys all the bags and bags and bags and bags of grass clippings that I was putting on here. Grass clippings are very high in nitrogen, okay? So all those grass clippings decomposing will help all those wood chips to decompose and vice versa, okay? Basically what I'm doing is composting in place, and I just do this every year. Now I've got a compost pile where all the weeds go, the kitchen scraps and everything, and I could do that here too. I could just bury it and everything like that, but that's a lot of work, and I like some compost to put around the plants and on top and everything when I'm going. But, everybody will say, gee, I use chicken manure or whatever. Chicken manure is great as a fertilizer, okay? And you can try getting 6 tons of chicken manure. You better have a massive poultry factory around you, okay? If you can get horse manure or cow manure, that's the best for building your soil because it's going to give you all those nutrients, plus it's going to give you soil, if you will. Now, if I go in here, and I want to show you this. Let's go over here where it's not. I want to show you 2 different things. Now, remember, this is year 2 for this garden, okay? So I've been working on it. But I want to show you we're digging soil here real quick. All right, so right here is where there's grass clippings. And if I go underneath, this is the soil I'm looking at. Okay, nice and crumbly. This is all the manure and wood chips and the grass that's composted from last year. That stuff is going to be fabulous to plant in. Now, if I go back over, see, there we go. Now, if I go back over here to the other side, where I needed more depth, and I'll again show you this. Okay, so now I'm into the wood chips and the manure, so you can see how far I probably just dug back about 4 inches. But this is decent, but it's harder. It's there. I can feel the clay somewhat still in it. All right, I've got to push my fingers in a little bit to break this, to dig it out with my fingers. So I want to get that good base built up. So I have, whoops, stick myself on a T-post. So I have a good base of soil, because your vegetables typically have, you know, somewhere between a 6 and an 8 inch root depth is usually enough before you're getting in, before it matters if you get into the clays or anything like that, because the roots just don't go that far. So you need to have that 6 to 8 inch depth of good soil. And what I've always found is, you know, layer of topsoil, layer of last year I layered straw in there. This year I had the advantage of being able to get more grass clippings, so I use grass clippings instead of buying the straw. Getting the horse manure in here, getting the wood chips in here. Obviously at this time of year the leaves will be all over the place. I want those leaves on top to get me that leaf mulch. What you're trying to do is build up as much organic material in your garden as possible, and manures are an excellent organic material. Now, come springtime, the first thing I will do is test my soil pH. I will test it for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium content, and then that will tell me, of all those fertilizers that I made, 2 weeks ago or whatever, and will continue to make over the winter, which ones I need in which places. Because just because this garden, let's say, is great in nitrogen doesn't mean my other ones are, right? Just because this side of this garden is good doesn't mean the other side of the garden is good, you know? So you got to test in multiple places in a garden so you can get your pH right, you know, somewhere between 6 and 7 for most vegetables you want, and then make sure you've got adequate amounts of your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in there. And then whatever you're missing, now you know. It's like, oh, I've got to add this fertilizer to the soil before I plant because it was my high phosphorus, or this one because it was my high potassium. Chances are I will have to add something with nitrogen. The fertilizers that, I mean, urine is great for nitrogen, coffee ground's great for nitrogen, blood meal is awesome for nitrogen. Okay, so whatever I have to add. But now is the time of year, if of course you don't have a foot of snow on the ground, to get your compost and to get your manures in your garden. Let them age all winter, because I mean it'll be what, 5 months till I plant now. I mean, here it is, what, December 5th. You know, the earliest I'm going to be planting anything in this garden is probably the end of April. Well, no, I take it back, the peas will be earlier. But yeah, so I mean, I've got 4 to 5 months before anything's planted. That's going to give everything a chance to age here, another half a year, if you will. That gives the worms and all the microbiology in there a chance to work on all this, break it down, mix the nutrients all together, and give me a much better soil. So just because it's the beginning of December doesn't mean gardening's done. And especially if you're doing raised beds and you've got to amend your soil, this is the time to do it. All right, guys, have a good Sunday. Pinball out.